The alarm bells rang through the halls of Galactic Peacekeeping Station Harmony as Communications Officer Zexathai rushed to his control panel. His four arms moved quickly across the holographic displays, while his large black eyes scanned the incoming data. The distress signal was weak and breaking apart, but the message was clear enough to make his blood run cold. Captain Velnara to the communications deck immediately. Zexathai spoke into his headset. His voice carried the fear that every peaceful species in the galaxy had learned to feel when they heard certain names. The Korth Empire was moving again. Captain Velnara arrived within minutes. Her blue skin had turned pale, and her usually calm demeanor showed cracks of worry. She was a Altarian, a species known throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic skills and peaceful nature. War was something her people tried to avoid at all costs, but sometimes the galaxy did not give them that choice. "What do we have, Zexathai?" she asked, while looking at the flickering display screen. "Distress call from Veltar. Prime Captain, the mining colony is under attack. From what I can make out through the interference, it's the Korth Empire. They're hitting the colony with everything they have." Velnara closed her eyes for a moment. Veltar Prime was home to nearly 2 million Veltarians, a peaceful species that had never hurt anyone. They spent their lives mining rare crystals that powered most of the galaxy's medical equipment. The idea of the Korth Empire attacking them was like watching someone burn down a hospital. "How long do they have?" she asked. Zexathai's face grew darker. Based on the transmission strength and the damage reports coming through, maybe 6 hours before the colony shields fail completely. After that? He did not need to finish the sentence. Captain Velnara walked to the main display and pulled up the tactical situation. 3 small galactic peacekeeping ships were all they could manage on such short notice. The nearest full fleet was 2 days away. By then, there would be nothing left to save. "Prep the ships," she ordered. "We leave in 30 minutes. Captain," Zexathai said quietly, "we all know how this ends. 3 light cruisers against a full Korth battle fleet. We'll be flying to our deaths." Velnara looked at him with the kind of sadness that came from making impossible choices. "Then we'd die trying to save 2 million innocent people. That's what we signed up for when we joined the peacekeeping force." 20 minutes later, the 3 ships of the emergency response fleet were powered up and ready to depart. Captain Velnara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Harmony's Grace, looking at the tactical display one more time. The odds were hopeless, but doing nothing was not an option. "All ships report ready, Captain," announced Lieutenant Kexra from the navigation station. "Take us out," Velnara ordered. "Maximum speed to Veltar Prime." The 3 ships jumped to hyperspace, knowing they were probably flying toward their destruction. The crew of each vessel prepared themselves as best they could. Some wrote final messages to their families. Others checked their weapons one last time. All of them knew that they were about to face the most feared military force in the galaxy, with barely enough firepower to scratch the paint on a Korth battleship. 30 minutes into their journey, something impossible appeared on their sensors. "Captain," called out sensor operator Zexathai, his voice filled with confusion. "I'm reading a massive fleet signature at the edge of the Veltar system. Energy readings are off the scale." Velnara moved quickly to the sensor station. "How massive?" "At least 40 ships, Captain. Maybe more. The signatures are unlike anything in our database. They're moving at incredible speed toward Veltar Prime." The bridge fell silent. No one had fleets that large just sitting around waiting to help. The Galactic Council's entire emergency response force consisted of maybe 20 ships spread across 3 sectors. Who could possibly have 40 ships in one place? "Are they Korth reinforcements?" asked Lieutenant Kexra. Zexathai shook his head. "No, the signatures are completely different. These ships are smaller than Korth vessels, but there are so many of them. And Captain, they're moving faster than anything I've ever seen." Velnara felt a small spark of hope, but quickly pushed it down. Hope was dangerous when you were about to face impossible odds. Can you identify them? Working on it, Captain. Trying to match the signatures against our database now. Dex highs. Fingers moved across his controls for several long minutes. Then his face showed complete bewilderment. Captain, this doesn't make sense. What is it? The computer identifies these ships as human vessels. The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone knew about humans, though most had never seen one. They were supposed to be a primitive species from a backwater world called Earth. Intelligence reports said they had barely achieved faster-than-light travel and were still fighting wars among themselves. The idea that they had 40 advanced starships was impossible. That can't be right, Velnara said. Run the scan again. I've run it 3 times, Captain. The computer is certain. Those are human ships. Before anyone could respond, the communication system crackled to life. A voice speaking broken galactic standard filled the bridge. Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. We received the distress call from Veltar Prime. We are responding to assist. Please identify yourselves. Captain Velnara stared at the communications panel as if it had just spoken in an ancient dead language. Humans responding to a distress call? With a fleet of 40 ships? It made no sense whatsoever. She activated the reply channel. This is Captain Velnara of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Admiral Morrison, we are also responding to the distress call, but we must warn you. Veltar Prime is under attack by the Korth Empire. This is not a situation for inexperienced ships. There was a pause before the human admiral responded. When he did, his voice carried a tone that Velnara had never heard before. It was calm, but there was something underneath it that made her skin crawl. Not fear exactly, but the feeling a small animal gets when it realizes a predator is nearby. Captain Velnara, we appreciate the warning. We have the situation under control. Human defense fleet out. The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Harmony's Grace in stunned silence. 40 ships crewed by a species that supposedly barely knew how to build spaceships were claiming they had a Korth empire. Attack under control. Captain, Dex High said quietly, we're getting reports from the Veltar system. The human fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. The Korth are demanding their surrender. Velnara felt her heart sink. Brave as the humans might be, they were about to learn why the Korth Empire was feared throughout the galaxy. Can you monitor their communications? Yes, Captain. The Korth Fleet Admiral is broadcasting on all frequencies. The voice that filled the bridge was deep and filled with the kind of casual cruelty that made the Korth so terrifying. Unknown human vessels, you have entered a Korth military operation. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to comply. Then another voice responded, and Captain Velnara felt something she had never experienced before. The human admiral's voice was still calm, but now she could hear what had been hiding underneath it earlier. It was not fear or uncertainty. It was the voice of someone who had seen war and was very good at it. Korth vessels, this is Admiral Morrison. You are attacking civilian targets. You have 10 minutes to cease hostilities and withdraw from this system, or we will treat you as a hostile force threatening innocents under our protection. The Korth Admiral's laughter echoed across the communications channel. Foolish humans, you face the might of 12 Korth battleships. Your small vessels are no match for our power. Admiral Morrison's response came immediately. Admiral, you should know that humans have a saying. Don't start a fight you can't finish. This is your final warning. Captain Velnara gripped the arms of her command chair. She was about to witness the destruction of 40 ships crewed by beings who were apparently too brave for their own good. The Korth Empire had never lost a space battle. Their massive battleships had crushed every fleet that had ever challenged them. But as she watched the tactical display, something strange happened. The human ships were not forming up in the traditional battle lines that every galactic navy used. Instead, they were spreading out in a pattern that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. Captain, Dexhai whispered. "The Korth are opening fire." On the display, 12 massive energy signatures lit up as the Korth battleships unleashed their primary weapons. Plasma cannons that could punch through a moon fired at the scattered human vessels. What happened next would change everything. Captain Velnara thought she knew about war. The moment the Korth plasma cannons fired, Admiral Jack Morrison watched the tactical display on the bridge of the UES Valiant with the calm expression of a man who had seen this exact situation many times before. Around him, his crew worked with the smooth efficiency that came from years of training and months of actual combat experience against enemies who fought just as hard as the Korth Empire. "Evasive maneuvers pattern Delta 7, ordered Commander. Lisa Rodriguez from her position at the tactical station. Her fingers moved across the holographic controls with practiced ease while her eyes tracked dozens of incoming projectiles. "Pattern Delta 7 confirmed," replied Chief Navigator Ben. "Collins, all ships are responding. Time to impact, 15 seconds. Admiral Morrison nodded once. "Lisa, authorize return fire. Rules of engagement are weapons-free, but try to disable rather than destroy. These Korth might have families waiting for them." "Understood. Admiral, all ships, you are weapons-free. Target engines and weapon systems first. We're here to stop a fight, not start a war." On the main display, the human fleet moved like nothing Captain Velnara had ever seen before. Instead of the slow, dignified maneuvers that galactic naval doctrine required, the human ships twisted and spun through space like fighters instead of capital ships. They moved in 3 dimensions at once, using the full volume of space around them rather than fighting in the flat plane that everyone else considered proper. The Korth plasma bolts, massive beams of energy that should have vaporized anything they touched, struck empty space where human ships had been just seconds before. Not a single shot connected with its intended target. "Impossible," whispered Lieutenant Kexra on the bridge of the Harmony's Grace. "No ships that size should be able to move like that." Captain Velnara could only stare at the display. She had studied naval warfare at the Galactic Military Academy. She had read every tactical manual written in the last 1,000 years. Nothing in her education had prepared her for what she was watching. The human counterattack began 30 seconds later. Instead of the massive energy weapons that galactic navies preferred, the human ships fired what appeared to be solid projectiles. The tactical computer could barely track them because they moved so fast. When they hit the Korth battleships, the results were devastating. "Captain," reported Dexhai, his voice filled with disbelief, "the human weapons are punching straight through Korth armor. The flagship just lost half its weapon systems to a single hit." On the human flagship, Lieutenant Karen Hayes monitored the communications from both the Korth fleet and the observing galactic peacekeeping ships. Her job was to make sure everyone understood what was happening and why. Humans had learned long ago that confusion in battle led to unnecessary casualties. "Admiral," she reported, "Captain Velnara is trying to warn us about Korth battle tactics. Should I respond?" Admiral Morrison considered this for a moment. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force had a reputation for being brave, but not very effective. They meant well, but they had never faced real military opposition. Still, they were trying to help innocent people, and that counted for something. "Put me through to Captain Velnara," he said. "Channel open, Admiral. Captain Velnara, this is Admiral Morrison. We appreciate your concern about the tactical situation. However, I want to assure you that we have extensive experience dealing with this type of opposition. Please maintain your current position and prepare to assist with rescue operations once we have secured the area." There was a long pause before the alien captain responded. "Admiral Morrison, with all due respect, the Korth Empire has never been defeated in open battle. Their ships are heavily armored and their crews are trained from birth for war. Perhaps we should coordinate our attacks to maximize our chances." Admiral Morrison looked at Commander Rodriguez, who was managing the battle with the calm efficiency of someone organizing a training exercise. 3 Korth battleships were already disabled and drifting. 2 more were trying to retreat, but human fighters were systematically destroying their engines. The entire engagement had lasted less than 5 minutes. Captain Velnara, we understand your concerns, but we have this situation well in hand. I suggest you focus on preparing medical teams for the survivors. There are going to be a lot of wounded on both sides when this is over. The communication ended and Admiral Morrison returned his attention to the battle. It was almost finished already. The Korth Admiral was screaming orders at his remaining ships, but panic had set in. Half his fleet was disabled and the other half was discovering that their weapons could not track targets that moved like the human ships. Commander Rodriguez looked up from her console. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 4 Korth vessels. The flagship is still trying to fight, but they've lost most of their weapons. Accept the surrenders, Morrison replied. Have Captain Murphy's squadron disable the flagship's engines but avoid casualties if possible. Once they're dead in space, we'll see if their admiral wants to discuss terms. Captain Steve Murphy acknowledged the order and led his squadron of 6 destroyers in a precision attack on the Korth flagship. The massive alien battleship, which had seemed so threatening just minutes before, was now helpless against ships 1/10 its size that moved like living things and struck like lightning. The battle ended 12 minutes after it began. 12 Korth battleships, the pride of an empire that had conquered 40 star systems, had been defeated by a human fleet using tactics that no galactic military academy taught and weapons that most species had never seen before. On the bridge of the Harmony's Grace, Captain Velnara stared at the tactical display in complete silence. Her crew looked at each other with expressions of shock and disbelief. Everything they thought they knew about space warfare had just been proven wrong. Captain, Dexhai said quietly, the humans are requesting permission to begin rescue operations on Veltar Prime. They're asking if we want to coordinate our medical teams with theirs. Velnara shook herself out of her shock. There were still 2 million people on the planet below who needed help. The battle might be over, but the real work was just beginning. Tell them yes, she said. And Dexhai, send a priority message to Galactic Command. Tell them we need to revise everything we know about human military capabilities. What should I tell them, Captain? Velnara looked at the display where human ships were already moving toward the planet to begin rescue operations. Medical ships that had appeared from nowhere were heading toward the disabled Korth vessels to help their crews. These humans had just fought and won a battle that should have been impossible, and now they were risking their lives to save the people who had been trying to kill them just minutes before. Tell them, she said slowly, that we just watched a species that we thought was primitive defeat the Korth Empire like it was a training exercise. Tell them that human ships move like fighters and hit like battleships. Tell them that they fight wars like they've been doing it for thousands of years. She paused, trying to find words for what she had witnessed. And tell them that when the humans won, the first thing they did was offer medical aid to their enemies. Lieutenant Karen Hayes opened a channel to all ships in the system. This is the Human Defense Fleet. The immediate threat has been neutralized. All vessels are requested to assist with humanitarian operations on Veltar Prime. Medical teams are standing by to help anyone who needs assistance, regardless of species or previous affiliation. Admiral Morrison stood from his command chair and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the galaxy, word of this battle would spread. People would want to know who the humans were and where they had come from. They would want to understand how a species that had barely achieved interstellar flight could field a fleet that made the Korth Empire look like amateurs. The answers to those questions were going to change everything. The surface of Veltar Prime was a scene of destruction that would have broken the heart of any peaceful species in the galaxy. Massive craters scarred the mining colony where Korth bombardment had struck the shield generators. Collapsed buildings, stretched for kilometers, and emergency signals flickered weakly from buried survivors. The air itself still glowed with residual energy from the weapons that had rained down from space just hours before. Dr. Rachel Coleman stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately began organizing the human medical response. Around her, teams of specialists moved with the same efficient precision that had characterized the space battle above. They carried equipment that the galactic medical community had never seen before and worked with a speed that amazed the alien observers. Sector 7 has the heaviest casualties, reported medic Tony Walsh over the communication system. We've got about 300 Veltarians trapped in the lower mining levels. The tunnels are partially collapsed, but we can get them out. Dr. Coleman nodded and pointed to her engineering team. Billy, take your crew and start clearing those tunnels. Use the heavy equipment if you need to, but be careful about secondary collapses. Lisa, get your triage units set up near the main colony center. We're going to have a lot of wounded coming through. Engineer Billy Thompson was already moving toward the collapsed sections with equipment that made the watching galactic rescue teams stop and stare. Human engineering tools could cut through solid rock like it was soft clay, and their portable shield generators could hold up entire buildings while rescue operations took place underneath. Captain Velnara walked through the human rescue operation with a growing sense of disbelief. She had been involved in emergency responses before, but never anything like this. The humans worked like they had been planning this specific rescue for months, instead of arriving at the scene just hours ago. Dr. Coleman, she said, approaching the human medical officer, your teams are incredibly efficient. How do you coordinate so many people without confusion? Dr. Coleman looked up from the portable medical scanner she was using to check a Veltarian child for internal injuries. Practice, Captain. Lots and lots of practice. Earth has natural disasters pretty regularly, and we've learned how to respond quickly. Plus, we've been doing this kind of work in war zones for longer than most species, have been spacefaring. The casual way she mentioned war zones made Captain Velnara pause. War zones? Oh, yes, Dr. Coleman replied while bandaging the child's arm. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Not in space, obviously, but on our planet. We learned early that if you're going to fight, you also need to know how to clean up the mess afterward. Medical teams, engineering support, logistics coordination, it all goes together. Before Captain Velnara could respond, her communication device activated. It was Dex High calling from the Harmony's Grace. Captain, you need to hear this. We're monitoring Korth communications and they're sending out some kind of galaxy-wide alert. Put it through, Velnara said. The voice that came through the communicator was the same Korth admiral who had been so confident just hours before. Now he sounded like a broken being trying to warn others about a nightmare he had barely survived. This is Admiral Takmor of the Korth Fifth Fleet to all Korth Empire vessels. Do not engage human ships under any circumstances. Repeat, do not engage human forces. Their military capabilities far exceed anything in our intelligence files. They fight like demons and show mercy like angels. Avoid human space at all costs. Captain Velnara stared at her communicator. In all of galactic history, no Korth commander had ever sent out a warning to avoid engagement with anyone. The Korth Empire had built its reputation on the fact that they never retreated and never admitted defeat. Dr. Coleman noticed her expression. Is everything all right, Captain? That was a Korth admiral telling his entire empire to avoid fighting. Humans. In 3,000 years of galactic history, the Korth have never admitted that anyone was stronger than them. Dr. Coleman shrugged and went back to treating the wounded Veltarian. Well, I suppose there's a first time for everything. Could you hand me that medical scanner? I want to make sure this little one doesn't have a concussion. Her casual attitude toward what might be the most significant military development in galactic history left Captain Velnara speechless. To Dr. Coleman, defeating the most feared military force in the galaxy was apparently just something that happened on the way to helping injured civilians. Meanwhile, in orbit above Veltar Prime, Admiral Morrison was dealing with a different kind of problem. Word of the battle was spreading faster than anyone had expected, and ships were arriving from all over the galaxy to see what had happened. Most were just curious, but some were clearly military vessels trying to gather intelligence on human capabilities. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Karen Hayes, we're getting communication requests from 17 different species. The Galactic Council wants to send a diplomatic mission. The Altarian Republic is asking about a formal alliance, and the Rigelian Trade Federation wants to know if we're interested in military contracts. Admiral Morrison rubbed his forehead. He had joined the Earth Defense Force to protect his home planet from potential threats, not to become the center of galactic attention. Karen, send a standard response to everyone. Tell them we appreciate their interest, but right now we're, focused on humanitarian operations. Any formal diplomatic contact needs to go through Earth Central Command. Yes, sir. Admiral, there's one more thing. We're getting reports that Korth forces throughout this sector are pulling back to their home systems. Some of them are abandoning colonies they've held for decades. Commander Rodriguez looked up from her tactical station. Admiral, that's not normal behavior for the Korth. They don't retreat from anything. What we did here today is going to change. How every military force in the galaxy thinks about combat. Admiral Morrison nodded slowly. He had been afraid of this. Earth had developed its military technology and tactics through thousands of years of warfare against other humans. When they applied those same methods against alien forces that had never faced anything like human aggression, the results were predictably one-sided. Lisa, make sure all our ships understand that we're not here to conquer anyone. We responded to a distress call and will continue to respond to distress calls. But we're not looking for a fight with anyone who isn't threatening. Innocent people. Understood, Admiral. But, sir, I don't think it matters what we want anymore. Every species in the galaxy is going to want to know how we fight and why we're so good at it. Down on the planet's surface, engineer Billy Thompson was explaining to a group of Veltarian workers how human tunnel-boring equipment worked. The aliens watched in amazement as machines the size of vehicles carved through solid rock like it was soft earth. The secret is in the cutting heads, Billy explained through a translator device. We developed this technology for mining operations on Earth. Turns out the same techniques that work for getting minerals out of mountains also work pretty well for rescue operations. One of the Veltarians, an elderly female named Sectara, looked at the human equipment with wonder. Your species must have very advanced engineering schools to create such devices. Billy laughed. Actually, we developed most of this stuff because we kept having wars and natural disasters. When your cities get bombed or hit by earthquakes on a regular basis, you get really good at digging people out of rubble. We just scaled up the technology for space operations. The casual way he mentioned cities being bombed made the Veltarians exchange worried glances. What kind of species developed rescue technology because their cities got destroyed regularly? Back in space, Captain Velnara received another communication from Galactic Command. This time it was Admiral Kexhan, the highest-ranking officer in the peacekeeping force. Captain Velnara, we need a full report on human military capabilities. The entire Galactic Council is in emergency session. Half the military powers in the galaxy want to form alliances with Earth, and the other half want to know if humans represent a threat to galactic stability. Captain Velnara looked out at the human fleet, which was now coordinating rescue operations across 3 different planets while simultaneously providing medical aid to the Korth prisoners they had just defeated. Admiral, I honestly don't know how to answer that question. They fight like they've been doing it forever, but they act like they just want to help people. They defeated the Korth Empire in 12 minutes and then immediately started treating Korth wounded. 12 minutes! Admiral Kexhan's voice showed his disbelief. 12 minutes, sir! And they made it look easy! There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. Captain, stand by for new orders. The galaxy just became a very different place. 2 days after the battle that changed everything, Captain Velnara found herself sitting in the officer's lounge aboard the UES Valiant, drinking something the humans called coffee and trying to understand how her view of the galaxy had been completely turned upside down. The human ship was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Where most galactic vessels were designed for comfort and efficiency, this ship felt like it had been built for war, but maintained with the care of people who understood that their lives depended on every system working perfectly. Admiral Morrison sat across from her. a tired-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and the kind of calm eyes that came from seeing too much combat. He had invited her aboard to discuss what the galactic community was calling the Veltar incident, though the humans seemed to consider it just another day at work. "I have to ask, Admiral," Captain Velnara said, setting down her coffee cup, "how does a species that only achieved interstellar flight recently have such advanced military capabilities?" Admiral Morrison smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Captain, I think there's been a misunderstanding about human history. We didn't achieve interstellar flight during a peaceful period of our development like most species. We achieved it during our Third World War." The words hit Captain Velnara like a physical blow. "Third World War?" "Oh, yes," Admiral Morrison replied casually. "Earth has had 3 conflicts that involved most of our planet. The third one was still going on when we developed faster-than-light travel. In fact, the technology came out of military research programs designed to give one side an advantage over the other. Lieutenant Nicole Adams, the ship's intelligence officer, joined them at the table, carrying a datapad filled with what looked like historical records. She was a young woman with sharp eyes and the kind of serious expression that came from studying subjects most people preferred not to think about. "Captain Velnara," she said, "the Admiral asked me to prepare a brief overview of human military history for you. I should warn you that some of the numbers might be difficult to believe." Captain Velnara nodded, though she was beginning to suspect that nothing about humans would be easy to believe. Lieutenant Adams activated her datapad and a holographic display appeared above the table. "Humans have been fighting organized wars for approximately 6,000 years. In that time, we've had roughly 400 major conflicts involving multiple nations and several thousand smaller wars. We estimate that over 2 billion humans have died in various conflicts throughout our history. The numbers were so large that Captain Velnara had trouble processing them." 2 billion? How many humans are there on your planet?" "About 8 billion currently," Admiral Morrison replied. "We've gotten better at avoiding wars in the last few decades, but for most of our history, conflict was pretty much constant somewhere on the planet." Lieutenant Adams continued her presentation. "What makes human military development unique is that we've been fighting opponents who use the same basic principles of physics and psychology that we do. When you fight other humans for thousands of years, you develop tactics and strategies that work against intelligent opponents who adapt to your methods." She brought up a series of historical battles on the holographic display. "For example, this is the Battle of Stalingrad from our Second World War. 2 million soldiers fought in a single city for over 5 months. The tactical innovations that came out of that one battle form the basis for most of our current urban warfare doctrine." Captain Velnara stared at the images of massive armies fighting in the ruins of a city. 2 million soldiers in one battle? That was actually a medium-sized engagement by the standards of that war, Admiral Morrison said. "The largest single battle involved over 6 million troops. We learned very early that if you're going to fight a war, you need to be prepared for your enemy to fight back with everything they have." Commander Rodriguez entered the lounge and sat down next to Admiral Morrison. She looked tired but satisfied, the way someone looks after completing a difficult but successful mission. "Admiral, the final casualty reports are in from Veltar. Prime, we saved 96% of the civilian population. Total human casualties were 0. "What about Korth casualties?" Admiral Morrison asked, surprisingly low considering. "About 300 wounded, mostly from when their ships lost power and artificial gravity failed. Their medical teams say they've never seen such careful targeting. Our weapons hit exactly what we aimed for and nothing else." Captain Velnara shook her head in amazement. "You defeated the most feared military force in the galaxy and managed to avoid killing anyone unnecessarily." Commander Rodriguez looked confused. "Of course we did. Why would we kill people if we didn't have to? The point was to stop them from attacking civilians, not to commit genocide." The casual way she said it made Captain Velnara realize something that chilled her to the bone. The humans weren't being merciful because they were weak or because they couldn't fight effectively. They were being merciful because they were so good at fighting that they could choose exactly how much damage to inflict. Lieutenant Adams brought up another section of her presentation. Human military doctrine is based on something we call overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The idea is to end conflicts as quickly as possible with minimal casualties on all sides. We've learned that long wars cause more suffering than short ones. How did you learn that? Captain Velnara asked. Admiral Morrison's expression grew darker. Because we fought plenty of long wars before we figured out better ways to do it. Our longest conflict lasted over 100 years. By the end of it, nobody could remember why it started, and entire generations had grown up knowing nothing but warfare. He stood up and walked to the viewing port that looked out at the stars. Captain, most species achieve interstellar flight after they've learned to live in peace with each other. We achieved it while we were still learning how to fight efficiently. When we finally stopped fighting ourselves and looked to the stars, we brought with us several thousand years of military innovation and tactical development. Captain Velnara joined him at the viewing port. And now you're using all that knowledge to protect other species. That's the plan, Admiral Morrison replied. We figure if we're going to be good at something, we might as well use it to help people who can't protect themselves. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Admiral Morrison to the command center immediately. We're receiving multiple distress calls. Admiral Morrison sighed and headed for the door. Looks like our reputation is spreading. Captain Velnara, you're welcome to observe our operations if you'd like to see how we handle multiple crisis situations. As they walked toward the bridge, Captain Velnara realized that she was witnessing the birth of something completely new in galactic history, a species that had learned to fight wars so well that they could end them quickly and cleanly, and who had chosen to use that ability to protect others rather than conquer them. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy would see it the same way, or whether the sudden appearance of such a powerful military force would destabilize the careful balance that had kept the peace for generations. On the bridge, Lieutenant Karen Hayes was coordinating responses to 7 different emergency situations across 3-star systems. Her voice was calm and professional as she directed human ships to various crisis points throughout the sector. Admiral, she reported, we have pirate attacks on a civilian convoy in the Rigel system, a natural disaster on Kepler 7, and what appears to be another Korth raid on the outer colonies, all requesting immediate assistance. Admiral Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the locations of all the emergency calls. How many ships do we have available? 37, sir. More than enough to handle all the situations simultaneously. Captain Velnara watched as the humans casually discussed dividing their fleet to handle multiple crises at once. Any other military force would have had to choose which emergency to respond to and which people to abandon. The humans were planning to help everyone. Admiral, she said quietly, your people are going to change everything. Admiral Morrison nodded. I know, Captain. The question is whether we can change it for the better. 6 months after the Veltar incident, Ambassador Helen Parker stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber on Harmony Station. The hall that had once echoed with peaceful debates about trade regulations and diplomatic protocols now buzzed with urgent discussions about military alliances and defensive pacts. Everything had changed since a human fleet had appeared out of nowhere and defeated the Korth Empire in 12 minutes. The delegates represented over 200 species from across the galaxy, and every one of them wanted to know the same thing. What did humanity want, and how much should they fear the species that had turned galactic military doctrine upside down overnight? Ambassador Parker was a tall woman in her 40s with the kind of steady presence that came from years of handling difficult negotiations. She had been Earth's first choice for this position, not because she was a military expert, but because she understood how to talk to people who were afraid without making them more frightened. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I come before you today to address the concerns that have been raised about human intentions in galactic affairs. Let me start by saying something very clearly. Earth has no interest in conquest, expansion, or building an empire among the stars. A murmur went through the assembly. The Altarian delegate, a being with pale blue skin and large eyes, raised one of his 4 hands. Ambassador Parker, your military capabilities suggest otherwise. No species develops such advanced warfare technology without aggressive intentions. Ambassador. Parker smiled, though there was sadness in her expression. Delegate Kexnor, I understand your concern, but you're making an assumption about human development that isn't accurate. We didn't develop our military capabilities to conquer other species. We developed them to fight each other. She activated a holographic display that showed Earth from space, a blue and green world that looked peaceful and beautiful. This is our home. For most of our history, it was divided into hundreds of separate nations that competed for resources, territory, and influence. We became good at warfare because we had to be. The alternative was extinction. The display changed to show historical images of human conflicts. Battles fought with primitive weapons, then more advanced ones, then weapons that could destroy entire cities. The delegates watched in horrified fascination as the presentation showed the progression of human military technology over thousands of years. We learned something during those long centuries of conflict, Ambassador Parker continued. We learned that peace is not the absence of war. Peace is what happens when good people are willing to fight for justice and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Delegate Thexra of the Rigelian Trade Federation spoke up. Ambassador, your fleet responded to distress calls throughout this sector. 7 different crisis situations were resolved in a matter of days. This level of military intervention is unprecedented in galactic history. Because it was needed, Ambassador Parker replied simply. When someone calls for help and you have the ability to respond, you respond. That's not military intervention, that's basic decency. The statement caused another stir in the assembly. Most galactic civilizations operated under the principle of non-interference. They believed that each species should solve its own problems without outside help. The human approach of actively responding to distress calls was revolutionary. Supreme Counselor Velthara, the highest-ranking member of the Galactic Council, spoke from her position at the center of the chamber. Ambassador Parker, we appreciate Earth's humanitarian intentions. However, many of our member species are concerned about the implications of such a powerful military force operating independently. Would humanity consider placing its fleet under Galactic Council authority? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every delegate in the chamber knew that this was the crucial moment. Would the humans submit to galactic authority, or would they insist on operating by their own rules? Ambassador Parker was quiet for a long moment, considering her response carefully. Supreme Counselor, with all due respect, that would be impossible. The Galactic Council operates by consensus, which means that any military action requires unanimous agreement from all member species. By the time you reach consensus on whether to respond to a crisis, the people who need help are usually dead. The bluntness of her statement shocked the assembly. Galactic diplomacy was usually conducted in careful, polite language that avoided uncomfortable truths. Furthermore, Ambassador Parker continued, Earth's military operates under principles that may not align with galactic political considerations. We don't care about trade relationships, territorial disputes, or political alliances when innocent people are in danger. We care about stopping threats to civilian populations as quickly and efficiently as possible. Delegate Kexnor raised his hand again. Ambassador, what assurance do we have that humanity will not use its military power for conquest once your immediate humanitarian goals are satisfied? Ambassador Parker looked directly at him. You have the same assurance that the Veltarians had when we responded to their distress call. You have our word and our actions. Judge us by what we do, not by what you fear we might do." She paused and then continued with a slight smile. "Besides, Delegate Kexnor, Earth has plenty of problems of its own to solve. We're not looking for more territory to manage or more people to govern. We have 8 billion humans who are still learning how to live together peacefully. That's a full-time job by itself." The Altarian delegate asked the question that everyone was thinking. "What happens now, Ambassador? How does the galaxy adapt to the presence of such a powerful military force?" "The galaxy adapts the same way it always has," Ambassador Parker replied. "Species that want to live in peace continue living in peace. Species that prey on others discover that their victims now have protectors, and everyone learns that there are consequences for threatening innocent people." She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed human ships responding to various emergencies across the galaxy. "This is what we offer. When someone calls for help, we answer. When pirates attack civilian ships, we stop them. When natural disasters strike, we provide aid. When aggressive empires decide to conquer peaceful neighbors, we remind them that such behavior has consequences." Supreme Counselor Velthara leaned forward. "And what do you want in return for this protection?" "Nothing," Ambassador Parker said simply. "This isn't a transaction or a business arrangement. This is just what you do when you have the power to help and someone needs help." The simple answer left the assembly in stunned silence. Most galactic politics revolved around complex negotiations where every favor required a favor in return. The idea of providing military protection without expecting anything in exchange was completely foreign to their experience. Delegate Thexra broke the silence. "Ambassador, surely Earth expects some form of compensation for military services rendered?" Ambassador Parker shook her head. "Earth expects nothing except that species stop attacking each other unnecessarily. We're not mercenaries and we're not conquerors. We're neighbors who happen to be good at stopping fights." Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to reorganize itself around the new reality of human protection. The Veltarians and 17 other species formally requested alliance treaties with Earth. The Korth Empire continued its unprecedented withdrawal from conquered territories. Pirate activity dropped to levels not seen in centuries as word spread that attacking civilian ships would bring swift human retaliation. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Several military powers formed a coalition to discuss the human problem and consider joint action to limit Earth's influence. But their discussions remained just that, discussions. None of them wanted to be the first to test human military capabilities directly. Meanwhile, Admiral Morrison continued receiving distress calls from across the galaxy, and the human defense fleet continued responding to everyone. They had become exactly what Ambassador Parker had described, the galaxy's emergency response force, not because they sought the role, but because they were the only ones willing and able to fill it. 6 months after a simple distress call had changed everything, Captain Velnara sat in her office aboard the Harmony's Grace, reading reports from across the galaxy. Pirate attacks down by 70%. Aggressive expansion by military empires halted completely. Civilian casualties from conflicts at the lowest levels in recorded galactic history. The humans had kept their word. They had used their terrifying military power to make the galaxy a safer place for everyone. The question now was whether the peace would last, or whether other species would eventually challenge the new order. Her communication system activated with an incoming message from Admiral Morrison. "Captain Velnara, we're responding to a distress call in the Centauri system. Looks like another natural disaster. Would the Galactic Peacekeeping Force like to coordinate relief efforts with us?" Captain Velnara smiled as she activated her reply. "Admiral Morrison, we would be honored to assist. The Peacekeeping Force is learning a lot from working with your people." "Glad to hear it, Captain. See you in the Centauri system." As her ship prepared to depart, Captain Velnara reflected on how much had